Gurudev Sri Sri Ravishankar has relentlessly and persistently been working towards global peace. Even when the odds were stacked against him, even when thousands stood on the other side and said his efforts would not succeed, he has been relentless in his efforts. And his message has even greater significance today. On the International Day of Peace, I spoke to him today as he opened up on issues like radicalization, the need to de-radicalize, how to de-radicalize, and even the current global number one issue, what to do with the Taliban. Here is an excerpt of an unmissable episode of The Nation Wants to Know, which will be played in its entirety over the weekend. Here's a short clip. Thank you very much, Gurudev. It's a privilege to talk to you again, and we are recording this on the International Day of Peace, Gurudev. So let me start by asking you, Gurudev, that in today's very, very, very troubled times, when all we see around us is violence, if I were to take an approximation of what gets covered on news channels, on news networks, more than 50% of the news nowadays would be around some form of violence. Sometimes even 70% of the news is such. So does the International Day of Peace become a bit ironical at a time like this?
First of all, let me tell you, Arnab, when they have announced the International Day of Peace, that the world community has recognized the importance of peace. And peace and prosperity go together. Wherever there is peace, there is prosperity. And if there is prosperity, automatically peace will follow. In some cases, of course, you need to rethink about it, whether it is external peace or internal peace. But peace plays a very, very vital role in the progress of mankind.
But at a time like this, Gurudev, it plays a very vital role. But is peace winning or is conflict winning? It's a thought which often comes to my mind. We all want peace, but very often we feel that conflict is getting the upper hand. Violence is getting the upper hand.
Certainly, the negative mindset takes an upper hand, but you will see in a long run, it's not sustainable. It just falls away. Because the natural tendency of people to be in peace. Conflict is not our nature. So we just want to get rid of conflict, but we don't know how, where, why. So, through defense we have tried. The countries have tried with defense in Afghanistan for the last 20 years to keep peace. It was not possible. Unless there is a transformation from inside, there is a change in attitude, I don't think we can achieve peace in society, peace in the world. What people have ignored all along is the individual inner peace. If there is no inner peace, there cannot be peace in the outer world around us.
No, I was just asking you that, Gurudev, I also often wonder whether it is practical to preach peace to people who are victims of conflict. We've seen the most horrific victims of conflict, whether it be in Syria or most recently across Afghanistan, the way people are suffering, the way women in Afghanistan are suffering. I'm just wondering, how does one preach peace to victims? Before we discuss how does one bring peace in society, or how does one make people rethink their approaches towards violence, for those who are the victims of conflict, how does one talk about peace to them? Doesn't conflict or being the victim of conflict make a person very bitter from inside?
Well, we don't need to give peace to those who are already peaceful. Where it is most needed is where people are either victims or they are culprits and who have been punished for their deeds. That is where peace is more needed. In a very peaceful atmosphere, when there is no conflict, peace has very little value. In fact, it has more value in terms of when you see people where they are undergoing a huge turbulence. Like, for example, 20 million people in Colombia, they were all victims, and we need to bring them peace, and that peace can only come through understanding, letting go of the past and thinking afresh for what we can do for the future. Same with, I would say, whether it's Iraq or Syria, where people had tremendous hardships in their lives, they are looking for some inner strength. Unless they feel the peace inside, their mind doesn't work. They can't think for the future. They can't take the right action. Either you are in a victim state of consciousness or you are in a rage, anger. In either case, people cannot take right decisions nor can act on them. That's why peace is important for anyone's brain to function properly in the right way, where they don't end up regretting their own action.
Where do you see things in Afghanistan going, Gurudev? Since the 15th of August when the Taliban entered Kabul, and that's why this conversation with you becomes so topical. You've been very vocal about the Afghan crisis, calling it a blot on humanity, and you have said that the mindset needs to be addressed. But in a context of a group like the Taliban, they go whiplashing people, they are taking young girls as slaves, they are shredding every bit of humanity, they have undertaken door-to-door executions, they have mutilated pregnant women. The stories that we are hearing are of another level of barbarity. How do you even begin to address that level of brutality? How do you even begin to address that mindset? How does one address that mindset?
Well, it is a very big challenge, big challenge which the nations have failed in the past. To address the mindset is the most important thing. Maybe through dialogue, maybe even the religious people who can explain to them what they are doing is not correct, or what they are doing is against humanity. Causing suffering to somebody is against, across the basic ethos of human society. So this is where, we will have to do peace education. In fact, the amount of money nations spend on defense, if a fraction of they have taken time to spend on peace education, educating youth, children about compassion, about belongingness, about togetherness, it can make a very big difference.
Let me be devil's advocate with you, Gurudev. If someone tells you that, Gurudev, it is impossible to de-radicalize the Taliban, you can't de-radicalize the Haqqanis, you can't de-radicalize the Al-Qaeda, you can't de-radicalize the Lashkar-e-Toiba. They have been trained to believe that their way of life is the only way of life, and everyone who's a non-believer, according to their definition, must be eliminated. And they would say, no, Gurudev, you cannot de-radicalize these people. You have to confront their violence with violence. First, you have to finish them, destroy them, and then you will get access to the society. And otherwise, it's very dangerous. If these extremely radicalized minds get access to a whole country, in fact, two countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan, they will run amok. How can you begin? You can de-radicalize a person, but can you de-radicalize a people? Can you de-radicalize a country that has been held hostage, Gurudev? Is it even possible to de-radicalize at that scale?
Well, what you're saying, I partially agree as far as the leaders are concerned who are so deeply steeped into it. Yes, it may not be an easy task, but nevertheless, I wouldn't say it is impossible. Number one. Second is, whom they are recruiting? These young minds, young people, whom they are recruiting, we can definitely de-radicalize. When the population is de-radicalized, they won't have any takers to such extreme thought process. here again, these people, if you see me from a different, if you see this whole situation from a different angle, you can see that these people were not exposed to a diverse wisdom. They are not exposed to the thing that you and me are exposed to. They have been brought up with such a narrow, limited mindset. The same was the case with the FARC in Colombia. They said they believed, the Karl Marx principle is their, the communism is their whole life, and that is their Bible. That is their religion. But then, when you get across to them, understand them and try to make them understand, I feel there is a possibility. Though in some cases the possibility is very bleak, but still that is possible. I've seen this in our own country, these sort of, mindsets. It's, after all, they're all human beings, that somewhere, something is gone wrong. And I think we must make an effort. Again, this can only happen, I usually say, when they are in the prison, it's easy to reform them, such people, because they have hearing, they have listening at that time. You see? So I have seen hardcore criminals, terrorists in prisons around the world have been reformed. But it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of effort and smartness and skill. Without skill, you cannot do this.
Tell me, how does the shift of mind happen? You have mediated in Iraq. You just talked about the conflict between the left-wing guerrilla group FARC and the Colombian government, which you did an incredible amount of work there. You have spoken to refugee youth from Iran, Syria, Lebanon. Gurudev, what I want to know, what our viewers want to know is, what the nation wants to know is, how does a shift of mind happen? A. B, do you believe in the domino effect, that if you change one person, if you de-radicalize one person, that person will have an impact beyond that? And can you share any personal examples? You may not share names, but can you share any personal stories of, for example, someone who was deeply radicalized, whose mindset, whose approach you have been able to change? When do you realize the moment of change happens? And what do you, I wonder often, how do you start a conversation? How do you make people who are very hard and very unforgiving and very cruel become so soft before you? Is it only in your divine presence, or is it that they stay that way even later? These are some questions which come to our minds. We'd like to hear some examples, some stories, some anecdotes perhaps.
Well, Arnab, there is no manual for this. You cannot say, oh, this you have to do like this, or answer. If this question is asked, you should answer this way. There is no set rules. It's something that you take risk and you play on it. You just sit with them, listen to them. First, make them realize that you are there for them, you care for them, and you listen to their concern, their side of the story. And then you slowly tell, what you think is right, what you think is more possible. A sense of communication, establishing communication with them is most important. I'll tell you one instance, one example for me that happened in Iraq. There was this divide between the Shias and Sunnis. In a village, 8,000 Sunnis were driven away from that village, and there was only Shia. The divide was so big between the two communities. So when I went there as a third person, they welcomed me. Then I said, I have a guest which I would like you to welcome. Next day, I took a person from the other community to them and say, and then they had some dialogue, and then, there was a big shift that happened. Then they welcomed the people back into their village. So this is one such example, and there are ample examples of where when the people know that you are sincere, you have purity in your heart and clarity in your mind, and you're sincere in your action, you know, you have to build that trust. They trust you. And the trust building is very essential for any conflict resolution.
Gurudev, I was just saying that it is so fascinating to listen to you and to hear you, and I think that your role and the role of Art of Living now becomes so important at a time like this towards pushing for a more peaceful environment around the world, Gurudev. It's a real pleasure talking to you, and I'm most grateful for you to take off some time and speak to me today, Gurudev. Thank you so much, and Pranam, Gurudev. Thank you.
Lovely, lovely Arnab, wonderful. All the best to you.